Hello, this is Dr. Phil Rosenkrantz again with EGR 403 Online. We're getting near the end of our series of presentations. This is presentation 16, talking about the selection of the minimum attractive rate of return. Let's go to slide number 2. You'll see that I've added that at the end of the page. This topic could have been presented several times along the way, and in face-to-face classes I've presented it a lot earlier than this. I'm not sure where the best place to do it, but anyway, we're going to go ahead and cover it now, and I think you'll understand it better since we've covered so much of the course already. Let's go to slide number 3. The minimum attractive rate of return is just that. It's the minimum that we want to accept from a project. If we can't get that kind of a return on our money, and we're basically saying we need to do something else. This number, the MARR, is generally the maximum of one of these three things: the cost of borrowed money, the cost of capital, or opportunity cost. I'm going to go through each of those, some in depth, some not, in future slides. Let's go to slide number 4. What is this thing called the cost of capital? And what we do is we look at money generated from the company and what our sources of funds are, and we call those our sources of capital. The external sources of capital are short-term borrowing, like from banks, and long-term borrowing, that could be banks, insurance companies, pension funds, or bonds, and also permanent sources of funds, which would be like the sale of our company stock. Let's go to slide number 5 and look at these things in a little more depth. The cost of capital is the after-tax weighted rate of return of borrowed funds from all sources. So we look at what percentage of our capital structure is from each source of borrowing. We look at what the rate of return is on those investments. In other words, what are we paying for those? Then we look at how much interest we're paying in terms of dollars and how much of that is deductible from our taxes, so that shelters us from taxes. And what we get at the right-hand column are after-tax interest costs. And it turns out in this example, where we're paying 9% for bank loans, 7% for mortgage bonds, and 11% on our capital stock, that we have a combined weighted cost of capital after taxes of 8.52%. And so this is a single composite number for our company of what it costs us whenever we want to acquire some capital. Whenever we want to get some money, this is how much it's costing us if you look at the average throughout the firm. All right, let's go to slide number 6. We're going to talk about the opportunity cost. The opportunity cost is the rate of return of the best opportunity foregone. In other words, this is the rate of return of the best project that we haven't done because we ran out of money to do it. If, for example, we had $1,200 that we could spend on capital projects, and if you look in this table, let's say we did our highest rate of return projects until we used up the $1,200, you can see that after the first 9 projects we had used up our $1,200, and the next project we would have done was project number 7, and it had a rate of return of 18%. So if we're going to do another project and it doesn't have a rate of return of 18%, we would have to ask ourselves, why would we do that one over this one right here that's waiting to be done? Let's go to slide number 7. Sometimes we want to adjust the minimum attractive rate of return to take into account risk and inflation and things like that. So all this slide is really saying is that sometimes we will take our criteria for coming up with the MARR and we will include a little kind of safety margin in there to take care of those things. So let's go to slide number 8. As we said before, the minimum attractive rate of return is generally the maximum of these three things: the cost of borrowed money, the cost of capital and the opportunity cost. And let me go through each of those real quick. If we can't get a return on a project that's greater than what the cost of borrowing money is, then we wouldn't want to do that project. We'd rather take that money and either one, pay off borrowed money, or two, why not lend our money out to somebody else? If we can get more money by lending our money out than investing it internally, then that's what we would want to do. Let's go to look at the cost of capital. That's an average cost of acquiring capital for the company, and so we wouldn't want to do a project for less than that because we could take that money and pay off some of that debt. And finally, opportunity cost. We don't want to invest in something that's in front of us when we have another project sitting on the side that could make even more. So taking the maximum of those three gives us the minimum attractive rate of return. That's the number we use. Now, we don't calculate that as engineers. That's done by the financial analysts in the company, and it's a number that could actually change every day. Let's go to slide number 9, and you'll notice that we have here some values for the MARR. You can see some bizarre numbers here. If a company is struggling for cash, they don't have a lot of cash, that means that if they borrow money, they're going to need money to pay it back. And if they're struggling for cash, they need it to pay wages, to pay for expenses, to pay taxes, and all kinds of stuff like that. They may not have very much money for investing. Well, if they don't have cash, the only justification for doing a project is that they're going to get enough cash back within that same year to pay off their investment and produce ready cash for other needs. So when you're struggling, you might have a 1-year payback period restriction, and you might want a greater than 60% rate of return. And I remember when I worked at General Motors, there were times when that was the case. The worst case I remember was when we had a 6-month payback requirement. And so the only way the company wanted to do anything is if they got some immediate benefits. And so the things that we did were projects where we could automate, eliminate manpower, generate, real tangible immediate savings. The next row on this table, when you're in a more economically stable position and you have adequate funding, then for small projects, you might have a variable life that you're looking at for payback that overrides your returns. And I remember at General Motors that we would typically have a 5-year payback period, and we had to make sure that we got our minimum attractive rate of return within that 5 years. Occasionally, when money was really flush, that would go up to 7 years. And the minimum attractive rate of return was 15%, and that was a before-tax MARR. You can see here in this table it's saying 12 to 15% is an after-tax MARR. And so those just gives you some numbers that if you were curious what they might actually be. These numbers vary quite a bit from industry to industry, public versus private sector, and how much risk you're willing to take, but just gives you some ballpark idea. So anyway, that's what the MARR is, and we used it quite a bit in our techniques for making economic decisions. But if you have a well-chosen MARR and good analysis techniques, then you're making the best decisions for the company. Thank you, and that's all for now. Bye.